Hi, so this week's worksheet is concerning the real number line and inequalities. In particular, we're working with interval notation here. Now, interval notation is something that you're going to see in statistics, sometimes to express answers, and we need to understand what the notation is telling us, and if we have an answer, we need to know how to write it. So just in general, when I explain this to students, is I say, okay, let's say we want to say any number from 5 to 10 will work as an answer, okay? So when you have an interval, kind of a whole set of numbers from this number to this number, think of it as a starting point and as an ending point. And what you want to do, like in the example that I just said, is you want to write down, let me get my pen here, you want to write down the number that you kind of want to initially start with, and the number that you want to end with. Okay, so I call this my left endpoint, and I call this one my right endpoint. Okay, so interval notation, you're going to have a left endpoint and a right endpoint. It's kind of like your beginning number and your ending number. Okay, now on each of those numbers, so if I say in words, verbally, that I want to include the numbers from 5 to 10, sometimes I want to include those endpoints. I want to include 5 and 10 as answers, but other times I want to say all the numbers up to 5, but not including 5 work, and all the numbers up to 10, but not including 10 may work, okay? So we need to be very specific, you know, like let's say for 10, I don't want to include 10 as an answer, but I want to include every number up to 10. So 9.9, I want to include. 9.99, I want to include. 9.99999, I want to include. Okay? So whether or not you want to include, though, the very number that you're stopping at, how you notate that is you use, as we're kind of talking over here, a parentheses or a bracket. Okay? If I would use, let me use a different color here. If I would use a parentheses, okay, a curved parentheses, that indicates that I want to include all the numbers up till 10, but not 10 itself. So I'm going to include 9, 9.1, 9.2, dot, 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 9.9, 9.999, 9.99999, but I'm not actually including 10. Okay, that's what this parentheses means. On the other hand, let's say with 5 here, I want to include 5. I want to include not just the numbers that are close to 5, but I want to include 5 as an answer. Then I would use the square bracket. Okay, so when you're using this symbol, that means you're including that number as an answer. If you're using the curved parentheses, that means you're including all the numbers next to, in this case, 10, but not 10 itself. Okay, so that's the difference between a bracket and a parentheses. And that's more or less what this table up here is talking about. They also show you a picture on the number line, and you can kind of throw in a parentheses or a bracket, and that tells you whether you're including that number or not. In prior classes or in high school, you may have seen this as a closed circle, open circle notation. That's how I learned it in high school, I think. In that case, this bracket is just like a closed circle, if you've seen that before, and this parentheses is just like an open circle, okay? So in the homework here for this worksheet, I'm giving you problems or questions here using inequalities, and what I want you to do is I would first color in, draw in on the number line what this is talking about. And then from the number line, for me personally, it's easier to go from the picture than to jump to this interval notation. Okay, so that's the order that I would do it. Here we have inequalities, draw it in, shade it in on the number line, and then write the interval notation. Because for me, it's easier to visually see a left endpoint and a right endpoint from the picture. Okay, just a little word of advice here with inequalities. This symbol, we always read from left to right, just like normal reading. So since it's bigger on this left-hand side, that means this side is bigger. Okay, this is a greater than sign. Sometimes students, let me sketch this out. I apologize that my screen is flashing there. I'll try to figure out what's going on there, but I want to get this video up for you. Think of it as an arrow, okay? So this is a greater than sign, and if you would kind of draw a line in right here, you would get this arrow that I have right here. That means you're going to be shading to the right. You're going to be shading that way on the number line, past the number that they're giving you. And this guy, if you would draw in a line like this, or in other words, this arrow here, that means you would be shading into the left. So if you had X is greater than 5, then on the number line, at 5, if you would think of this greater than, if you would kind of draw a line in right here, then you would kind of visually see an arrow pointing to the right. That means you are going to be shading in all this area over here. And then how to determine whether to put a parentheses or a bracket, okay? If the inequality does not have an equal to underneath it, then you do not want to include that number. So looking at number 1 here, there's no equal to. So that means I don't want to include 2 as an answer. I want to include every number by 2, but not 2 itself. So in that case, we're going to be using that open parentheses, okay, that curve. Whereas for number 2, this one has an equal to down here. That means I want to include 5 itself as an answer, and in that case, I would use a bracket, okay? Notice when I drew it in, and you can look at some of the pictures up here, when you draw in your shading and then have to decide parentheses or bracket and which way it's facing, your parentheses and bracket will always face towards the shading. Okay, so I kind of curved it around the shading here rather than drawing it curving this way. Okay, so hopefully that gets you started. I know some people are visual learners, but other people like to hear it and see, kind of talk through what's going on here. So hopefully that gives you a little guidance. I apologize again about my screen going a little crazy there. I'll try to figure out what's going on, but good luck.